Yeah, so that to me at least has yet to be defined. We have had those conversations with the Homeless Ministries Task Force, which, so we have had those conversations. Is this a drug and alcohol free zone program? Is this a harm reduction idea? If it's a true housing first, it is more of a harm reduction where people cannot be using on site but could come under the influence. But we also understand that for this to be a successful pilot project, we might want it to be a 100% clean and sober program. So that's something that really, it's up to the site. For safe parking, some of our sites are clean and sober because the site asks us to do that, and others you can come under the influence. So it's really dependent on the individual site and what people want to have happen. I will say that to kick somebody, it's hard for as a program operator, and I understand from my standpoint, we have large shelters. For example, our Sam Jones shelter is 188 beds. It's really hard to run a harm reduction model where people can come in under the influence with so many different people and so many different personalities. But in smaller programs, it does work really well because it's a little bit more manageable, and it's not a same, because of addiction, which is a whole nother conversation in terms of how it can affect people's lives. Because you may have accidentally relapsed, you're now back out, without any support and without the program. And so it is hard to make those decisions, but we also understand that we want this to be a successful pilot. So the need is definitely for us to do something to kind of meeting in the middle, but we also understand if the church council and the Homeless Ministries Task Force really feels that to start, we should start clean and sober, we have the flexibility to create either program. So because we operate both right now.
And if I can just comment on that too, we talk about low barrier shelters, and I know I've shared with some of the groups that we've been meeting with. The more barriers you put there, the more challenging it is. If you understand the concept of everyone needs housing, and if you did have some addiction problems, or if you did have a checkered past, come to actually being a productive member of our community, would it be easier for them to do that if they had some housing or if they are out on the streets? And specifically, I'll talk about, let's say, a registered sex offender. A lot of people don't realize, but we have over 300 in this community. Now, the real violent, dangerous ones are incarcerated, but people have made mistakes. What about a parolee? Are you going to allow a parolee in here? Well, I've talked to people who've come to that epiphany while they're in prison. One person I'm thinking of, he got sentenced to like 26 years in federal prison for dealing cocaine. He wanted to be a Tony Montano. But he came to this epiphany while in prison, but yet there was no way for him to get out. They were throwing the key away. He ended up getting his bachelor's, his master's, was working on his doctorate till the warden said, wait a minute, I'm uncomfortable with this. But the guy's an inspiration. So he spent, and I would believe him, probably about 20 years of his life in prison when he could have been a productive member of society giving back. So I would, rather than have a hard and fast rule, I would really be open to the conversation and actually just talk about what the person or persons may or may not contribute. And don't just label them, former gang members. Okay, you can allow former gang members in here. Some people may say it's a black and white issue. Absolutely not, until you get to know them. So again, I would just really strongly recommend that relationship and be open to the conversation about not making black and white decisions. Yes on this, no on that, because we're all people and we've all made mistakes.
And I'll mention the Palms Inn is a harm reduction model, and I realize I didn't explain what that is, so I'm going to. For those that don't know.
You speak a little.
Oh, sorry. Usually I have the opposite. I'm usually really loud. So the Palms Inn is a harm reduction model, and what harm reduction means is that you do not have to be 100% clean and sober when you come into the program. You are not allowed to use drugs or anything on site. You can, though, come in under the influence. And the idea being that we start with where they're at right now, and then based on their plan, remember the individual opportunity plan, they start doing less and less harmful versions of what the original addiction was about. So for a lot of people, they may have been drinking hard liquor like vodka. They might transition to, a less harmful liquor, and then ultimately off of it completely. And harm reduction has been proven to be much more successful than 100% clean and sober, because when you are mandating that people become clean and sober, you take their choice away. And when you take a person's choice away, they're much more likely to resist the change. But if you empower them to make the choice themselves, they're much more likely to make that transition. And so the Palms has been a great experiment for us on that. And we have seen people completely transition off of drug and alcohol when they were drinking like 2 handles of vodka a day. So, I mean, it's definitely is proven to work. And I can also see it being that we want it to be clean and sober, maybe as a pilot beginning a couple of months, and then we maybe relook at it and see how it's going, and maybe we can make that change as well. But just so you know the options, know the opportunities, and really that would be the choice the church would need to make.
I would just like to say too that even as we've alluded to, we haven't made up the final details of exactly what's going to, who's going to be allowed in and the conditions that they live under while they're there. But right now, just as an example, I have a friend in the church who formerly, or is, or was, however you want to term it, an addict. And he'd been clean and sober for quite a while. And then within a period of a few years, or excuse me, a few weeks, he lost his car, he lost his apartment, he lost his job, and he lost his sobriety. Now, he would have been an excellent candidate for our group here. Having links available for addiction counseling for the people in our church, that doesn't mean that everybody there is an addict. But the counseling needs to be made available, and I think those folks who were addicts and are clean and dry now would be the first to say that continuing training, continuing counseling is good. And that's why we need to make sure that we have links to various social programs in there for all sorts of problems. And addiction is one that you will find many of our homeless people have run into at one time in their life or another. And it's to get rid of it is a continuing program, a continuing pathway that they're on. And while they're here, we need to make sure that we have the linkages to continue whatever it is they need to improve themselves.